There is potential for 3 big NATO countries to make big and sudden change, or not. And with what's happened in what is really still recent years, these elections are a chance to get justice for millions of people who have suffered at government hands and can make or break the future of their countries and others. This is what I will look for. Threats and lies, not promises, which I trust none of them to keep. Unfair advantages such as special education where they got what they wanted and their competitors got held back. And ego. Ego is bad in leadership. And atrocities of their past. I don't care how long ago it was. Clocks and calendars are irrelevant. And stopping is not redemption. Here is how my selection process worked for this election. I line up the candidates. If you're wondering why Women's Equality Party, True and Fair Party, and of course, who would leave out Monster Raving Loony Party? The answer is, they are not available in my area. Same is true for most areas of UK. This video is only going to be facing the 5 parties that are competing for almost every seat in Parliament. So after this video, if you want to vote, check the Electoral Commission to see if you have any options I haven't included in case one of them is better than my winner. When they're lined up and confirmed by Electoral Commission, then I give points. In this game, points are bad. Whoever has the least at the end wins. Points can come in normal 1s or big problem 10s for when 1 is not enough. I start with history and the party's background, then I go to their manifesto and count everything I don't like. This is how they competed. Enjoy. This party has never had a Prime Minister before. They are a clean desk. So we must skip the history checks, and since their heads of parties are cleaner, we go straight to their manifesto. They say they want to replace GDP, average salary, with something accurate to actually show a nation's wealth and compare it to others. This is good because average salary doesn't really work because it doesn't reveal how spread or concentrated wealth is, or how it compares with the cost of living. But they didn't say what they would rather use instead, which is bad for them because we don't want a ruler who complains, then shuts up. We prefer rulers with answers. Here are some examples of better ways to measure and compare wealth than average salary. Bikes per person, number of meals, cheapest, that average person can buy with money earned in 1 day, televisions per person, people per computer, floor space per person. For context on this one, UK ranked worse than Japan and New York. Average time on holiday per year. Alone, they all have their problems, as all statistics do, but combined, these should give you a score to show a nation's wealth. Property developers must give more of their profits to council. Imagine this. You are renovating a house for your salary. After all those hours, days, and weeks, you finally get a sale. Then, Green Party shows up, steals your money, wastes your work, and that money ends up wasted on a failing project. If you have the idea in your brain or its tumours that abortion has saved more lives than it's killed, and benefited women and gender equality and reproductive rights around the world, you are in for a severe reality check. They are way too open to illegal immigrants. I plan to be an immigrant somewhere myself one day, but I'm going to do it legit. Why should I if it's easier to do it illegally? Green makes no difference between legit immigrants and invaders. Unfair for legits, and dangerous for risking the consequences illegals come with. Foreign aid up 1/3. Not only am I not normally a fan of charity, but when you're helping other countries, you need to be very careful who those countries are. What if they're bigots, terrorists, or idiots? We need to know what they're capable of and what goes on in their heads. In a time when the economy of UK has been wrecked and cost of living has rocketed, UK wants to use its own money for itself. The only foreign aid in UK's interest right now is to reinforce Ukraine, because it's a tactical way to kill lots of Russians, and reinforce Taiwan, because it's a tactical way to tame China. They show a picture of someone holding a sign saying, "Education is a public good." Until the day comes that I can explain all the details, I will summarize as, it's not. Free university and student debt forgiven. Nothing is free. What teacher is going to work without a salary? Someone is paying for it, and I think it will be taxes. I stand by my choice to never go to university, and I refuse to pay for something that I never want. Increase arts funding by £500 million per year. But arts are businesses. It's up to them to make their own money, and if they can't, then it should be a hobby. I make art. Can I have some of that $500 million a year? These days, the money needed to make art is more affordable than it was 100 years ago. The average person in UK does have enough money to make a cheap film by themselves with mostly their creativity, or make a YouTube channel, or sing or play an instrument with an online audience. This is an unnecessary tax raid. Less unhealthy food adverts. Labour moaned about this once and it achieved nothing. If someone sees less adverts, they will still see it in shops and they will still crave them for their taste. If I wanted junk food, I wouldn't wait for an advert before saying, "Oh, I can finally go to a shop now." If I want junk food, less attention on it will not stop me. Besides, there is no unhealthy food, only an unhealthy diet. A meal of chocolate will not make you obese all of a sudden. Spend more on NHS with goal to treat everyone, but not solve the issues that make people sick in the first place. Smoking, obesity, and above all, education. We want to see them stopped. They talk about reforming education. They want transgenders to be taught about in school, which is an improvement over Tory, Labour and Liberal Democrat. But I can smell lies, and Green doesn't convince me it wants to reform education for a second. If it did, it would abolish education. I like clean air zones, but Green used the words rigorously enforced air zones. What's the enforcement plan? Remembering that UK has possibly the least effective and most corrupt police force on earth. Build 100,000 new houses per year for 5 years. How is 500,000 new houses going to be compatible with their other promise, a green space within 5 minutes walk for everyone? Is this really what we want? More greenbelts turned to more streets and houses? The solution to growing population is to reproduce responsibly, not spread further. Finally, Green is too confident in UK wealth. They keep saying, UK is rich, we can afford this. They want to increase foreign aid by 1/3, spend extra $500 million a year on arts, make university paid for by tax, and replace benefits with a universal salary for all citizens. But the fact is, the UK is not a quarter as rich as Greens think. For context, compare UK economy to France. UK loses in average salary, but the real loss is the debt. On average, everyone in France is owed 100 grand. If all debts in the world were paid now, on average, everyone in the UK would lose 20 grand. Being in that level of debt during a cost of living crisis is not a rich country. It's easy to compare UK to very poor countries and say it's rich. But really, poor countries do have enough to survive. They would naturally shrink to a smaller population if that wasn't true. The reason you see world hunger is because people make stupid choices. They have no money for food, but plenty of money to pay a surgeon to cut off their 5th daughter's clitoris. And they choose to have 10 children. In the USA, if someone was living in poverty, struggling to eat, unable to support their family, in the minimum shelter they need to call it a modern home, unable to pay for non-emergency healthcare, the last thing they would do is have another baby. But this logic is forgotten in many poor countries because they care less about responsibility and more about using their children as tools for power, and it shows. The point is, stop comparing UK to poor countries and stop judging the UK economy by the amount of money it has and start judging the UK economy on how sustainable its economy is, because right now it's unsustainable. This is why in 200 years, UK is going to be struggling to do anything when France will be thriving. That leaves Green on 41 points for this round. That is the score that all the other parties need to beat if they want my vote. The next political party I enter is Reform UK. Even though they have never had a Prime Minister before, they have had big influence. Brexit was their idea. I know this has given different people their own ideas of if it was right or wrong. Even Reform UK has since said that Tories haven't used it as effectively as Reform UK believes they should and could have. But the people made their democratic choice and they live with the consequences or the rewards. But for judging Reform UK, let's start by finding skeletons in their closet. Some of their members stood up to Muslims and Jews. The party responded by firing them. Whether you like Jews and say this is bad, or you hate them and say firing them was bad, this is still a bad point either way. If you dig further, you find them saying stupid and mean things. One of their climate change deniers wants to kill David Attenborough. Even if you think he deserves it, can I ask why specifically him out of all the hundreds of people who work with him? And keep going and it gets worse. Some of them made a bad, not funny joke about brown babies, and I don't want you to hear it said in my voice. If you want to know what the joke was, then pause this video and research Reform UK brown babies, and you will feel the full disgust at what they said. The person who said this joke was rightly fired by Reform UK, who did not tolerate their behaviour. But even so, this is still a point against Reform UK for a reason. This means an unacceptable member was hired by them, which means their selection process is faulty. How many times has this fault been exploited? How many other faults are in their selection process that can be used to let a number of awful people into their party? And even though they finished the case correctly, we are now asking, how many times is this going to happen? I don't want a Prime Minister who spends all 5 years of their term firing their own MPs in a drama after drama after drama. Keep researching, at least one of their members is a convicted animal abuser. Hypocrisy is one of the worst things a leader can have. Put it next to cruel and foolish. And Reform UK has it. They are against foreign owners of UK things. For example, they would be against a UAE company trying to buy the Telegraph newspaper, and against a Czech billionaire from buying a UK mail company, which are both things that have been debated. But one of their members has a show which has an investment company from UAE. They can have it one of three ways. One option, the other option, or a bad point from my vote. On to their manifesto. The first impression I got was ego. They say, and they are not the only annoying ones to say this, UK has so much potential. Shut up and get on with it. They want schools to stay ignorant and negligent against transgenders. This is how it was when I went to school, and it achieved nothing. Nationalise half of utility companies and pensionise the other half. In other words, steal the life's work of long-experienced business builders at the expense of taxpayers, some of who don't even use those companies. They are against crypto money. Why? I'm thinking if they were a party a few millenniums ago, they would have been against coins instead of rice. Thousands of years before that, they would have been against rice instead of whatever people can find. Money in any form is nothing more than a trading tool. It doesn't matter if it's coins, notes, pillows, or digital points or bottles. Let people trade their own bargains how they agree. 1/5 of benefits will be cancelled. This sounds good for workers with long hours, but remember why people end up on benefits in the first place. It's only rarely laziness. I'm on benefits, but I have a job and work hard every day. Why do you think it takes me so long to get a YouTube video out? The reason most people are on benefits are because we were let down by the government and therefore the people. People on benefits have paid lots more to the government than the other way round. It's clearly wrong for the government to take away from an already weak apology. An apology that's currently so weak that it doesn't come close to making up for what I've suffered at government hands. They say, children learn best in school. I went to school, and to make a long essay a short answer, No, they don't. They don't want to teach critical race theory. I'll be honest with you, every time I research this, I forget what critical race theory is so fast after, but in the notes I made, which are beyond forgetting because I typed them down, Reform UK has a bad idea. They say, transgender is a safeguarding issue. Shut up, no it's not. Thousands more police to stop the UK's out-of-control theft. It's true that justice rates in the UK are awful. Only 1 to 3% of reported thefts get solved. But the solution is not throwing money at it. Police in the UK are infamously flawed. Only very rarely is a fault in the services a result of not enough money. Nearly always, instead of throwing more money at it, you want a change of strategy. For example, solving the cause of theft in the first place. What victims of theft need is less toxic education, less police corruption, improved police attitude, and more available affordable security. And yes, a stronger economy will possibly limit theft too. They say they want a faster court, but they don't say how. It's true, courts are so slow, but moaning about it isn't going to speed them up. We want solutions. Anyone can point out a problem. Reform UK thinks UK has the finest, best trained and bravest military. Bold words, but they are only words. There are over 100 countries saying that about their militaries. Veterans will be protected from prosecution. This is what it sounds like to me. If a gang of people with assault rifles attack unarmed victims because a corrupt politician ordered them to, then no justice will happen. They choose the word invest to describe supporting veterans with healthcare and new job practice. Taxes paid veterans their entire salary. It's not taxpayers' responsibility to help strangers get a job or go to hospital. Instead of abolish the House of Lords, they want to replace it with a second one. I predict they will just become corrupt too. When a politician lies to me, I can smell it. When Reform UK says they have a moral duty to society to give something back, I don't believe them. Next lie. Wind turbines need insurance so they are covered at times when there is no wind. I don't believe them. When they swapped heads of party, they changed the way they presented their manifesto. In the last one they said, government is brilliant at making temporary rules to solve a crisis, but terrible at getting rid of them. Income tax was a temporary solution for a war more than 200 years ago. It is true that any temporary rules in response to a crisis is in one way or another a sign of a bad leader. Instead, they want to design their society in such a way that they can already survive a crisis before it starts. But they didn't throw a ball, they threw a boomerang. And they are the same party that wants to add temporary rules about electricity price. Let me guess, it's going to take them more than 200 years to get rid of them. No subsidies for clean energy. But messy energy gets loads of subsidies. The difference between them isn't just clean or messy, it's also renewable and running out. In 300 years, the countries that will be dominant are the ones with biggest renewable supply per person, when the coal and oil users have less. Climate change denial. You will find in life when a big question comes, one answer is clearly a lot better than the others. If everyone thought objectively, they would all easily come to the same conclusion. But you can argue anything if you try hard enough. So no matter how much evidence of climate change builds up, someone is going to be choosing which facts to show or hide. UK Reform had a whole page on their old manifesto dedicated to arguing against climate change. I will go over their points as someone who has seriously studied the natural world for years like a total nerd. Polar bear population is growing, not shrinking. They were very clever about how they said this. It was true. I read it in spring. I assume they last edited it within months before, so winter or spring. That's the polar bear birthing season. Of course their population is going to grow, no matter what threat their species faces. Great Barrier Reef has been surprisingly unaffected. That may be true, but if 9 out of 10 reefs were dying, anyone could find the 1 in 10 and say, look, there is no problem. In fact, many reefs are slowly suffering as a result of sea levels rising by more than 4.5 centimeters per decade and extra ultraviolet trapped under greenhouse gas layer. Arctic ice has advanced since 2012 Common Era, which is true. That was when it was measured at its lowest. But when I was studying this as a serious nature fan, on the same page the book also said, it is predicted there will be no summer ice in Arctic by 2050 Common Era. Read the whole page, then choose what part of it you want to take to heart. Because greenhouse gases have warmed the planet and added CO2 into air, plants are thriving better. It's true, any change in any balance will benefit an opposite. But that doesn't mean the new balance at the end is going to be better for everyone. In this case, more CO2, then more plants, then less CO2, but not all the way back down to what it was. Those new plants mean more animals, including mostly gastropods, who breathe. This breath will add CO2, which is fine assuming balance. A good mix of plants and animals will make a fair balance. But if you keep adding extra CO2, then the new balances they make will be different from the balances before. Ross Ice Shelf is stable. This is true. I know this from my marine biology study, and in the same 2 pages, they included information about glaciers and ice shelves in both hemispheres. You had a better point with the Hubbard Glacier, which is actually growing. Let me guess. You didn't use that example because either you didn't know it even existed, or you're aiming for an audience of dummies who don't want to read about anything unless it's famous. But if you count all the ones which are stable or growing, it's not as many as are shrinking. They say climate change has been happening for all Earth's history, and humans causing it can be argued with the question, by how much? Let's give some examples. After all, I really studied this. Today's average temperature is 14 Celsius. During Cenozoic, it has gone up and down, but the average for the last 65 to 66 million years is 14.5 degrees Celsius. It's colder now than it was in most parts of this era. In Triassic, average was 17 Celsius. Jurassic, 16.5 degrees Celsius. Cretaceous, 18 degrees Celsius. We are living in one of the top fraction of the coldest times in 252 million years. I will admit my faults. I don't know the average temperatures of Paleozoic periods. I'm sorry. But to my defense, it's really hard to find books on any paleontology that is not Mesozoic because this country is too focused on non-bird dinosaurs. Non-bird dinosaurs and Smilodons. The last time the planet was as hot as this on average was 850,000 years ago. For context, this was the time of Homo erectus, long before Homo sapiens showed up. Humans haven't even heated the planet up as much as that. Why do I say all this? To prove I actually know anything. And as someone who knows a big lot, I promise you, humans are having one of the biggest impacts on Earth it has ever known. In a very long time, for all the reasons you already know about because it's general knowledge, and more that you have to actually study in order to know about. Few events in Earth's past are as big as this one. What humans are doing is on level with the meteor that played its part in wiping out 3/4 of animal species, and some other things that you probably don't care about because it's not about non-bird dinosaurs or Smilodons. And humans are even a runner-up to an event in Earth's history so big it's called the Great Dying. Species on Earth normally go extinct at a stable rate, the same rate that new species appear. Right now, species are going extinct at 1,000 to 10,000 times the normal rate. And it's not just bugs, monkeys and birds who are suffering from this. It's humans too. UK reform finishes with a score of 69. Greens are winning, but there are still more parties to come. Will Reform UK come second, third or last? Wait and see. Next is Conservatives, also known as Tories. They changed their name at some time, but they are the same party. Since 7th Prime Minister, they have been on and off and dominant for centuries. they outlived the Liberals, they survived the rise of Labour, but how and why? This is the one that Reform UK rised from. Their founders used to be Conservatives, but were sick of them and decided enough is enough, let's do something better. Let us do this fast. History of racism. History of sexism. History of anti-LGBT+. They had a Prime Minister for the entire 80s, when Pride was becoming successful. But no thanks to their Prime Minister, who was resisting it and resisting it and resisting it. Even when it was time to make gay marriage legal, even though it was with a Conservative Prime Minister, they had a coalition with Liberal Democrats. Conservatives were divided on the votes, but Liberal Democrats were the reason gay marriage became allowed. So Conservatives still get bad points. Margaret Thatcher, on that note, adds her own points. She was a sexist, homophobic scumhole with ugly hair. Some people like her, but some people think Beesner was a god. So excuse me for not caring what some people think. They have let 6 coronations happen. They are the only party to have done this in recent 100 years. 10 points for each one, plus 60. When I was a teenager during David Cameron's term, they raised minimum school leaving age to 18. This condemned me to a year of neglect, abuse, and psychological torture, which I am not grateful for in any way. Forcing me to start A-levels was a massive waste of time for everyone involved. Not one person achieved one thing, and all that happened in the end was all that was always going to happen. I left as soon as I was allowed and never even finished. Massive waste of time, massive unnecessary suffering. Some people are lockdown fans. Those people aren't going to get very far through to me. Lockdowns were a hideous betrayal against the people who voted Conservatives and a hideous abuse of power. A hideous sabotage of the country's economy and health. Because of the wrath of Conservatives, hundreds of thousands of people have died, and to show for it, nothing. And for those of us left behind, no lockdown fan has ever been able to explain to me how deliberately sabotaging an economy in the run-up to World War III and cost of living crisis is a good idea. Here is my improvement on what to do a few years before a cost of living crisis. Don't deliberately sabotage your economy. Lockdown Trilogy has lasting effects because now millions of people are unemployed and not looking for work. And I don't blame them. What Tories did was the equal of you going, "Oh look, a cute duck pond. I'm going to throw rocks at it. Oh no, the ducks have flown away and don't come back." Well, what did you think was going to happen? Tory said, "Oh look, lots of people finally getting the job they wanted. I'm going to stop them from working. Fine them for doing it, fine their customers, send police to harass them. Oh no, people don't want to get jobs anymore." I understand. What's the point of getting a job if the government is going to oppress you for it? Last word on lockdowns for the video. You don't give someone a 10 grand fine and then get their vote. Lockdown gets 10 points each, plus 30. Boris the Monster gives his own points. He came with big promises, and even I got a bit excited that there would be good change. Instead of keeping his free BBC licence promise, within months on the job, the corruption was leaking out of his skin. He was a sneeze-skin, maggot-toothed liar, with slug bellies for palms and rat tails for fingers. Not only were they transphobic in the past, they are also trying to bring back transphobia. They want what really are absurd laws if you think about them. New buildings will be legally required to have segregated toilets? What for? Schools are being at best not made to and at worst banned from teaching about transgenders. I went to school under Conservative government when they barely mentioned transgenders, and it would have saved a lot of people a lot of time, stress, and maybe even life if they had just said what there was to say when I needed to hear it. Tories don't give half a penny when a transgender is killed. They prefer to use it their advantage, bickering with Labour. When asked to apologise, their Prime Minister refuses twice to the interviewer's face on camera. When Scotland tries to protect transgenders, All they get is hate from Tories. Tories and Joanne Rowling. At this point, their plan to get illegal immigrants away is getting started. But it's too little, too late. Illegals have been a big, growing problem for years now. For those years, the Tory strategy was argue about it. We should leave ECHR. No, we shouldn't. We should send them to Rwanda. No, we shouldn't. House of Lords will block it. No, they won't. I want a leader better than argue for years, then too little too late. Since Boris the Monster showed up, the Conservatives aren't economy builders anymore. Boris the Monster tore the economy to pieces with the lockdown trilogy. I can let Liz Truss off because I don't think anyone in her position could have grown an economy at all. She even proved it wasn't her plan that was making UK poorer by changing her plan completely, and the shrink was still there. But now Rishi Sunak's here. Taxes rocketed up when he started. That was when he used inflation as an excuse. Now he's trying to lower them, but let's not be stupid. We know they're only lowering them because elections are coming. If they are elected again, all their promises of low taxes will be broken, and it's another 4.5 years of high taxes until the next election is close. If you want a good economy, stop voting for Conservatives. It's time to change to someone who hasn't lost it. Since 1997, when UK made the outrageous decision to ban guns, Conservatives have had their chance to correct this. They have refused constantly. Another 10 points for, despite banning guns, having armed police. It's a rule for one and another rule for another. And don't give me the, they need it for their job, because I see right through it. When a politician puts up a fake excuse like a wall, I can see through it like a window. Armed police aren't done giving Tories 10 points. They are the most racist people in the country. They see an innocent black guy, say he's armed, then terrorize or even murder him, and then call it their job. The black guy was unarmed by force and innocent by choice. But that didn't matter because the police had a gun and he didn't. People who live in countries with gun rights don't always understand how lucky they are. For all you people with the rights but not the brains to appreciate the rights, I want you to memorize this quote about life in a country where people don't have gun rights. The only armed and dangerous people are the police, but that doesn't matter because the police are armed and dangerous. Labour shares these ones with them. A Post scandal where innocent Post staff are wrongly convicted of stealing money that really went hiding from a fault in the software. People spent many years in prison for a crime no one committed. The real crime was the people who covered up the software faults. If they had rushed to report their mistake as soon as they realised they made it, then I would have forgiven them on the spot. We all make mistakes. But what makes this an offence was they chose to let innocent people rot while hiding their own guilt, all while the Conservatives and Labour watched. Same story with the infected blood scandal. Started with Labour, Tories chose to continue it. A mistake was made and people got infections from blood transfusions. Instead of report the mistake and make it right as soon as they knew, they decided to cover it up and let more and more people die or get long-term medical damage. And now that they're getting compensation, it's not out of Tory wallets or the wallets of the staff who did this. It's out of taxes. So innocent people are paying for the crimes of the guilty, including the crimes of the Conservatives. I don't tolerate unfair advantages in elections. I will always give a point when I see one. In 2019, Keir, I believe this is before he was head of Labour, made a post. Conservatives edited it to take away the context and make it seem as if he was saying something completely different, and then used this against him in the 2019 election that ended us with Boris the Monster. It used to be that newspapers were supposed to be integral and objective, never have an opinion. That was for the reader to decide. A rule like that was never going to last long. These days, lots of newspapers glorify one party and condemn another. They are supposed to give information that people need to hear. For example, reporting about all parties. So everyone knows which is what and can decide who is right to vote for. Instead, they refuse to mention new ones and give their favourite a cheat to the level of evil. Conservatives get 10 points each for Daily Mail, Daily Express. I'm going to be honest. I did this before they released their manifesto, but really, they should have had it available before the May elections. And it's 80 pages long, and it's not worth reading because they have already lost a few times over. Conservatives finish with 197 points. I could have stopped this ages ago, but I just couldn't leave so many points unsaid. Next party is Liberal Democrat, also known as Whigs, also known as Liberals. They changed their name in the past when their party divided, then again when one of their son parties merged with another. But splits, mixes, and game changes don't mean much to me. As far as I care, it's all the same cycle. A lot of people assume Liberal Democrats are a new party building up, but in fact, they are the last of an old party that was wiped out in 1922. The first 6 prime ministers in a row were all Liberal Democrats. Then it was a Tory. Then the next 4 prime ministers in a row were Liberal Democrats. Then it was a Tory. Then the next 3 prime ministers in a row were Liberal Democrats. Then for a long time it was ping-pong between them until Liberal Democrats lost forever and then Labour started rising. A lot of people like Conservatives because they were leading during World War II, but Liberal Democrats was leading during World War I. In fact, the 1916 election is the last election they ever won. I'm yet to study more about that time, but maybe people didn't like what they did in World War I. Are they going to come back out of the ashes like a phoenix? Or are they just a dead bird? Let's find out. Let's go. History of racism. History of sexism. History of anti-LGBT+. I know that yes, although Conservatives had the Prime Minister when they voted to allow gay marriage, Conservatives were conflicted, but had a coalition with Liberal Democrats who voted together to allow it. But this doesn't change that every Prime Minister Liberal Democrats has ever had has always made LGBT+ illegal, which is absurd. But Liberal Democrats are an absurd party. If this is the way they are, then maybe we should prefer them as a smaller party and vote for someone else. Their current head of party went to Oxford University. I'm not stupid. I don't think it means he worked hard, earned his place there, worked hard there, and is a genius. I see through this. He was less oppressed in school. Bigwigs in education liked him and went easier on him. He was given unfair advantages, and now he wants to keep the unfair advantage going his way and nowhere else. They say, education is the key to opportunity and the best possible investment for the country's future. I could go on and on explaining all the examples showing this is wrong, but we've got lots to talk about. There's a party after this one, so to keep pace, I will give you the answer you need. No, it's not. Liberal Democrats allowed 4 coronations to happen in their time. To be clear, in the history book I used, there was a coronation on the same year when dominant parties swapped, so I don't know which party let that one happen. It would take too long to research that one, and time is ticking, so I will give those 10 points to neither party for this election. Only plus 40 for Liberal Democrats this time. Liberal Democrats finish with a score of 90. I'm going to be honest, I started reading their manifesto, but it was stinking of lies. They already got more points than Green and Reform UK, so I didn't see any point in going further, which I know ruins comparing the lowest rankers to see who were second worst or the third worst, so I'm sorry to disappoint your curiosity, but the important thing to decide who to vote for is which one comes first best. So far it's Green, but competition is still coming. Next party, Labour. Out of all 3 parties to have a Prime Minister, Labour is the one with the least because it's the newest. Their first Prime Minister appears in 1924, then they lose and come back in 1929, then it's ping-pong again, but this time replace Liberal Democrats with Labour. History of racism, history of sexism, history of anti-LGBT+. For context, the last time they had a Prime Minister, they didn't allow gay marriage. If they get another Prime Minister, there is a risk they're going to ban it again. Even though I was only 11 years old when Labour lost their last Prime Minister, I do remember them and the country they were running. It has not aged well. As it turns out, school was just a big trap and teachers are able to get away with way too much. Health and safety was taken to an unhealthy and dangerous extreme. They considered it too dangerous to go outside when it was raining or snowing. So as someone barely old enough to remember them, I am going to use my memory of them. They were not running good schools. Yes, I went to a private school back then, but it changes nothing. Government still has plenty of control on them, and Labour did not use that control with the right intentions. Students were getting screamed at publicly when they did nothing wrong. Teachers had tempers shorter than exclamation marks. If I behaved as my teachers did in my own professional job, I would be fired. But educators know that kids don't have the experience to know what behaviour is good enough or not. So they tolerate it until it's too late for them to do anything about it. And how many tooth fairies and Santa Clauses do they need to officially teach to real students in real schools in a national education system before I can say, lots of what they taught us was a load of rubbish? Labour was running a scam, and I'm not stupid. I know that a lot of what I didn't like during the Conservatives' rule over education was inertia from Labour, and they're waiting for their chance to do it again. Reputation of bad economy. I'm going to let them off for the last few years of their last Prime Minister because, to be fair, there was an international collapse of economy that would have made UK economy fall whether they had one party or any other. Labour didn't have much to do with lots of other economies that were also falling at the time. And to be fair to them, there have been times when they have increased minimum wage, which was good. But they can be judged by other times in the past when they have had the responsibility and they let us down. My parents tell me stories of how all the systems froze. No one collected bins, for example. Let's not go back to that. Gun rights were lost in UK the same year Labour last became dominant. They had until 2010 to make that right. They refused, and we all pay the consequences. Remember the Post scandal I moaned at Tories for? Labour did it too. Remember the infected blood scandal I moaned at Tories for? Labour did it too. Labour isn't the only one guilty of this, to be fair, but Labour doesn't want to be fair. Both Green and Reform UK say they want parties to not be allowed to pay for their own campaign. Instead, money for a campaign would be paid for by authorities and all parties would have an equal amount. Which is a fair thing to want because otherwise it's victory to the highest bidder. Elections should not be auctions. Not only has Labour paid newspapers for full-page adverts on the front page the week before an election last year, they also talked rubbish on it. They said a vote for anyone other than Labour only benefits the Conservatives. They are referring to tactical voting, or as I like to call it, not strategic or tactical at all voting. That video is coming. All I say for now, not strategic or tactical at all voting is a load of rubbish, and so is letting Labour get away with evil adverts. Daily Mirror has been sucking up to Labour for years, talking all the good talk, shutting up on all the bad talk, hating on their rivals, rarely putting attention on other parties, crying like a baby when they want something done, and cry that only Labour will do it, and every time they do this, I see through it. Labour so-called finishes with 64 points. So-called because, again, I didn't even get to their manifesto because there was no point because they've already lost anyway and I'm running out of time to make this before election. I know I left them beating Reform UK even though I'm not convinced Labour is the better of the two, but we only get one vote this time and therefore we all only need to choose one winner. And I believe we have that winner! Green wins! I don't know what will happen on Thursday, but Green is my champion of the 5. I don't like it, but it's a lesser of 5 evils situation. Unless you can find a party in your area who is not as bad as them, I highly recommend you vote Green, because the 4 main alternatives are even worse. Let's hope that millions of people do the right thing on Thursday. Either way, I will see you in the apocalypse. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this or found it helpful, then click like and comment so I know to make more of this. Please show this to everyone you know, even if they don't vote, because the more information gets out there, the better votes people will make. Even though the election is going to finish, it's still worth looking at this video again for future elections. If you want to see more, Click my channel name or icon for more. I will see you next time. And subscribe to survive.